I awoke from a dreamless sleep. My eyes opened lazily, tearing through a layer of crust that had built up in the crack. Above me, the ceiling had a panel, an artistic rendition of a skylight with soft rays of sun filtering through the leaves of a tree. The rest of the room was dark. No light shone through the window to my right. The lights flicked on as I moved in my hospital bed, gripping the rails as I adjusted to a seated position. Static, once again, filled my ears. It was like the din of a cathode ray tube slowly crackling and decaying into silence. But the sound continued, echoing through the deepest reaches of my mind, bouncing off the inside of my skull indefinitely. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was something more tangible. I could reach into the darkness and grab a hold of it before it slithered through my fingers. Something I've told my clients popped into my head. It can feel like hell isn't really a place. Rather, it can feel like a state of being. It doesn't have to come after death. It can exist right here on Earth, living like a parasite on the backs of the less fortunate. I know it's a cliche, but clients usually find it to be a meaningful metaphor. I never used to really believe that line. People can be tortured, live through awful things. But could it really be like hell? I had no way of knowing until this happened to me. I believed in people, in the human spirit, in living right here, right now, and pushing through, defeating our demons. But maybe that's the point. We live in our own personal hell, and then that's it. We either push through it, or we don't. It's up to us. The stillness of my dark revelry caused the motion-activated light in my room to dim. I sat listening to the static. It had a directionality to it. It almost seemed to be muffled, like it was coming from behind the door. I looked towards it and noticed a whiteboard on the wall and a small bag with the hospital's logo on it. The whiteboard had my name when I was brought in, and when the nurses would be in to check on me. I eased up to the edge of the bed and placed my bare feet on the cold tiled floor. A chill ran up my exposed back as I left the warmth of the bed behind. I needed to find where the sound was coming from. I stripped out of my hospital gown and dug through the bag, finding my clothes and belongings. The fob for my car key seemed to be melted, the plastic warping and dripping like hardened candle wax. I didn't have time to question it, so I quickly shoved them in my pocket, pulled on my shoes, and entered the hallway. It was louder out here. As I began moving in the direction of the buzzing, the lights overhead came on and flicked off as I passed them. It seemed too dark for a hospital. Each clunk of the motion-activated lights turning on seemed to make the buzzing louder. I passed room after room. Each of their doors were open, but no patients were inside. There weren't even any nurses at the station when I passed their desk. As I got closer and closer to the source of my affliction, sound became more and more like a feedback loop, like I was a microphone heading towards a speaker. The compulsion to find it was overpowering. My head started pounding, and my gut twisted at the thought that I could be headed toward a trap. I felt like a fly heading towards a bug zapper. The hallway curved sharply and I cautiously slowed, not sure what to expect around the bend. As I crept closer, the sound began to undulate. It was breathing again. Light seeped into the hall, getting brighter as I made my way to the end of the curve. I stopped in my tracks. Ahead of me stood a group of people, bathed in a pulsing, crackling light that poured from an open doorway. There were dozens, maybe the whole floor of the hospital. They were gathered outside one room. The blood drained from my cheeks as I moved forward and began pushing my way through a crowd of hospital gowns, scrubs, and white coats. Their mouths were slack, eyes wide open, unblinking and bloodshot. They were all staring straight into the room, catatonic. They took no notice of my presence. Their breath on my neck and their pallid flesh touching my skin sent shivers through me. I looked ahead, yet was no closer to my objective. I pushed onward, but the hall seemed to stretch, sending the door further out of reach. After what seemed like hours of struggling to reach the room, I could no longer claw the bodies apart. The crowd was packed too tightly. I tried to breathe, but each exhale became more shallow than the last. I closed my eyes and felt a mass of bodies, their weight enveloping me until my ribs folded in on themselves, collapsing my lungs. Silence deafened me. The buzzing was gone. I opened my eyes. A dark void lay before me, floor rippling beneath my feet with sparks of light. I was back. The lake of shadow. I glanced around, trying to get my bearings. Behind me, a pillar of light rose from the darkness. I turned to face it. The bug zapper, I thought morbidly, not daring to take a breath. I felt myself glide across the floor, motes of light kicking up from under my heels. I gained speed before coming to a jarring halt at the source of light. It took the shape of a man. Tendrils rooted themselves in the ground and slowly entwined to form legs, girdling around to form a torso and bulged until a head took shape. This rudimentary human form made of snaking energy tilted its head in confusion. The words, "Why are you here?" rang not in my ears, but vibrated through the very bones of my skull. My pulse quickened as I recognized the voice of my client. I had no time to react before the figure reached towards me, grasping my arm. The smell of ozone and seared flesh filled the air as blistering heat wrapped itself around my wrist and raced towards my shoulder. I tried to wrench my arm free, but the figure just pulled me in closer. A shrill screech filled my ears as bolts of electricity jumped from its eyes to mine. The arcing light stretched across my body as my flesh bubbled and cracked. Light seeped through and exploded from every pore. Blinded by light, deafened by sound, and crippled with pain. I closed my eyes and fell backwards, away from the figure's embrace. I hit something soft. What had been a deafening scream was instantly replaced with crystal clear music. The overwhelming pain had evaporated. I was in the back seat of a car, swerving listlessly between lanes on the highway. The clock on the radio read 4:38 p.m. I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or dreaming, knocked unconscious by whatever the doctors had injected me with. I hated this traveling, as my client called it. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror and met the gaze of the bleary-eyed man hunched over the steering wheel. I didn't know why I was there or where he was taking me. "Hello?" A shaking voice came out barely above a whisper. The driver must not have noticed me before this. His eyes went wide before he shouted, "What the fuck?" Jerked the wheel hard out of confusion and surprise. The car skidded and rolled, sending old beer cans flying. My head snapped in all directions before the car came to an abrupt, whiplash-inducing halt as the passenger side wrapped itself around a power pole. Both of the driver's side doors hung open from the damage inflicted by the crash. I quickly unbuckled myself and stumbled a short distance from the car before falling to the ground. Aside from some scratches and a sore neck, I was unharmed. I sat in the grass, trying to figure out why I was in this stranger's car. It took great effort to bring myself to a standing position. I surveyed the wreck and was struck by the driver's familiar face. I knew that gash on his forehead. It had been a recently healed scar, but it now leaked fresh blood. I looked closer, and beneath the drunken, ruddy, swollen, and bruised exterior, it was my client. I backed away as I heard the sound of a deep electric hum coming from above as the pole began cracking. It leaned over the car, stretching the power lines. I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable. The pole came down directly on top of his car, and the impact sent him sprawling through the open door. The snapping and whipping of the power lines brought me out of my stupor. I watched as they snaked and thrashed their way towards my client. I brought my hand to my mouth, biting my knuckles to keep from shouting as I watched his body seize and convulse from the raw energy flowing through the cables. I couldn't watch him die, not after last time. His silent words of, "Don't take me," echoed in my mind as I sprinted back towards the wreckage. I grabbed him by the ankles once the power line had slithered out of reach and dragged him as far as my legs would allow before I collapsed. A man came running towards us from the other side of the road. "Call 911!" I shouted to him. I put my fingers to my client's neck. I searched for a moment but couldn't find a pulse. All of this was because of him. I needed to know why we were here. Tears were streaming down my face as I desperately took both of my fists and pounded them on his chest. I beat him hand over fist. I was angry, confused. He couldn't just die and leave me stranded. Not after tearing my life apart. With one final blow to his chest, the word, "No!" tore its way out of my throat, raw and guttural. My client gasped. He was alive. But it all felt too familiar. Panic surged through me, my mind snapping back to our first session. A terrible realization clawed its way to the surface as I shouted to the man on the phone. "What day is it?"